Professor Attahiru Jega joins us now, Chairman of INEC. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me here today.
I imagine how difficult this job will be now. All eyes will be on you ahead of these elections. How are you even coping?
We do our best under all circumstances, and the work is there to be done. Somebody has to do it, and it is our lot to do it, so we just give it our best.
Let's get your comment on what the gentleman in that report talked about. Observers, what was the issue? He felt something wasn't done properly.
I didn't get that impression from what he said. I think all he is saying is that, as is done globally, an electoral commission should allow observers the space they require to be able to observe elections, to ask questions, and to have election officials respond to their inquiries or questions. And we do that in INEC. All I did was to emphasize the distinction what distinguishes an observer from a monitor, because sometimes observers tend to act like monitors. If you are an observer, you see what is going on. If something is going wrong, you report it, but you do not intervene to try to solve a problem, because that is interfering with the conduct of the election. And we have seen in the past a tendency of observers who know the rules, they have read the guidelines, they see something going wrong, and they want to interfere. So we are saying, please, you are an observer, observe. We have monitors who are trained to interfere if something is going wrong so that it can be corrected. And this is a global best practice. So all we are doing is using the opportunity of briefing observers to remind them that as you observe, be careful. Don't convert your observation into monitoring and interfering into the process.
Okay, so that distinction clearly drawn.
Yes, it's drawn and it's very explicit in the guidelines, but it's an opportunity to remind them. Yes.
Just to also remind our viewers, in addition to our Twitter handles, you can also tweet your questions to #AskJega. And then at the end, towards the end, we'll always go back and take those questions. Let's start with talk about security. It was the big issue the last time out. What is the latest perspective on the matter?
I think the latest perspective of the matter is that the security agencies wanted a 6 weeks extension and strongly advised that that should be provided in order for them to be able, when we conduct elections, to give their best in protecting lives and property. And we looked at their advice and we roll out elections personnel and materials, and for 2015 we are getting about close to 700,000 ad hoc staff. And when you are strongly advised not to do something which will concern the lives of over 700,000 people, we felt obligated to accept that advice. As I speak with you, we have received assurances that adequate security will be provided for the elections that have been rescheduled for the 28th of March and the 11th of April. And we are all focused on making those elections the best elections in our country.
Clarify for us the situation with the 3 local governments. We heard you talking about this some time ago.
Yeah.
What's the situation about that one as well?
I understand that there are still 3 local governments in Borno State which are still occupied, or which are not totally cleared of the insurgents. Which means a military operation is still going on in those 3 local governments. So as far as we are concerned, we've already made arrangements to cater for the interest of internally displaced persons. And there are 2 categories of internally displaced persons. Some are in camps and they are fewer in number than those that are outside of camps, that are living in host communities. But we have made arrangements in Adamawa, in Yobe, and in Borno to create centers where internally displaced persons can vote. If areas cleared of insurgency are safe enough and people have gone back and have resumed their normal lives, we can go there and conduct elections with adequate, of course, normal security provisioning. But areas like these 3 local governments which are not safe, which still military operations are going on, until we are told by the security agencies it is safe to go there, we certainly can't go there. So, but those residents of those local governments that are in camps or are internally displaced can use the opportunity of the IDP voting we are providing for them to be able to cast their votes.
You know, that controversy raged as to whether or not the polling centers were going to be in the camps or they were going to be outside the camps, so as to enable those who were displaced but not staying in the camps, perhaps staying with relatives, to also vote. How is INEC able to resolve that?
Yes, when we designed the methodology for enabling internally displaced persons to vote, we took into account the fact that there are fewer people in camps and more of them outside of camps. So our own methodology recommended that the voting centers for internally displaced persons should be outside of camps. We discussed this with stakeholders, but in Borno State, the meetings of stakeholders unanimously agreed, and we have minutes of that meeting, that it is safer in Borno State to conduct elections for IDPs inside the camps. So the key question is, how can we ensure that conducting elections inside the camps do not give advantage to one party or the other? And it is our responsibility, working together with the security agencies, to ensure that we create a level playing ground that will not give undue advantage to any partisan interest. But also, that we must work together with security agencies to provide adequate security, you know, so that conducting elections in the camps also does not constitute a security risk.
So what you're saying is that these elections will be conducted outside the camps for Yobe and Damara, yes, but in Borno State they will be in the camps.
In Borno State they have agreed that the camps are safer, and in the camps, you remember, is some public institutions that have been converted into camps. So there are residential areas and there are areas that are non-residential. So the non-residential areas are the areas demarcated where arrangements will be made for the voting. You know, so we feel if the stakeholders say this is what they want and it's been discussed, there is really little that we can do, you know, under those circumstances, because you have to take into account what they think is the right thing to do under the circumstances.
Well, this is very important, because we've always been on this particular matter. There've always been complaints concerning the displaced persons. But one other thing is with the card reader. I'm trying to marry that with the camp issue, because it's been tested here live in our studios, and we understand that, well, it is keyed to polling units.
Yeah.
So if you were to have that in a camp, what form of card reader would you be using for those knowing full well that these are people that have come from different polling units, all hold up in a particular camp?
Yes. Well, I'm very glad that you raised this. You see, most of the camps are organized in such a manner that they represent local governments, you know. There is hardly any camp that is a mixture of people from different local governments. So as far as we are concerned, it's easier. Our people have already done an assessment as to who have collected their permanent voters cards. So we are going to set these camps in accordance with the local governments and the polling units that are clearly evident in terms of the number of people in the camps. You know, so that arrangement has been neatly done. I regret I haven't brought a copy of our methodology. You would have seen how we have outlined it. So we will still configure the card readers in accordance with the polling units in which majority of the people in the camps are. You know, so really it will not constitute a major problem in terms of methodology of the conduct of the elections. And we have to do that because we also have to make returns. You know, there are elections are based on constituencies, either for Senate or for House or for Governor or for State Assembly. So we have to make sure that the voting is conducted in such a manner that we are able to disaggregate the votes going to the constituencies. Now, it's a bit more complicated, but because we are dealing with only 3 states, you know, and fewer numbers, you know, we believe we will do it well, and it will add value to the, not only to the integrity of the elections, but to the possibility of having a return in these states. But by the time you say we want to go and do for all internally displaced persons outside of these states, that's where it becomes very complicated. And that's why we said we are not, at this point in time, going to even attempt that.